Welcome to We Are Everyone, a video and podcast series powered by Pivotal Moments, and we focus on the intersection of mental wellness in the workforce. We bring together young professionals and mindful executive mentors to bridge the generational gap and bring to the surface conversations about the importance of mental wellness and how to overcome career tradition challenges. Mental wellness is paramount. Join us. Welcome to We Are Everyone. I am your host, Jenn Sherman, and we have a very special guest today. We have Rayne Steinberg. He is the CEO of Arca. Welcome, Rayne. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Jen. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, virtually, unfortunately. I wish, eventually hopefully we're trying to do more of these interviews in person, but, it's just the lay of the land in the world we live in right now. So I guess just if you could tell the audience a little bit briefly about your background. We'll include all of that, of course, in the show notes, but just to get everyone to get to know you, and then we can jump into the meat of the interview.
Sure. Professional background?
Professional, personal. I mean, this is a podcast around mental wellness and fitness. So, everything ties into everything.
Okay. I was originally born in New Orleans. I grew up in New York. I've founded an exchange-traded fund company called Wisdom Tree in the early 2000s with my older brother, Jonathan Steinberg, who's still the CEO there. And now, as you mentioned, I'm the CEO of the digital asset management company, Arca.
Awesome. So, something that at least I've personally observed is the culture of Arca and also your leadership strategy. And a part of that, which we've seen really in the past, I guess, year and a half at this point, I can't really count. And I'm not saying that mental wellness and fitness wasn't important pre-pandemic, but particularly in the pandemic, we've seen it really come to fruition. And something that we've been talking about at Pivotal Moments is mental fitness and being aware of the importance of mental strength. So just curious, Rayne, what do you think of when you hear the term mental fitness?
I think a well-balanced, healthy mind that is able to cope with adversity, that has good balance. I think balance is very important between work and life. I think that, we'll probably get into it, but the pandemic has really, made it almost too easy to work in some regards, and has really alerted us to that. Also brought up some of the issues with isolation, group dynamics, interacting digitally. So all of these things. So I think mental wellness is, really a pliable, healthy mind that helps you deal with, a very changeable world. So, and we're starting to see that flexibility and optionality are super important in this world. And I don't think you can do that if you don't have a healthy mind.
Yeah. And I completely agree. I mean, someone who probably manages anxiety on a day-to-day basis, and I say manage because I don't really like saying anxiety is a challenge because, everyone has their stuff, but it's something where at least with the pandemic, I feel like you kind of had to face your mind more so than you had when we were kind of all the hamster wheel before the pandemic. So it's just interesting, the evolution of that healthy mind and being, I'm going to say mindful, but being mindful about your, how you're feeling and just showing up and being present. So speaking of which, of evolution, as your career has evolved, and I know you mentioned, you were a co-founder with your brother. And so you have been at the forefront of leading and managing for quite some time. Is as your career has evolved, how's your definition of mental fitness, and how's your definition in relationship with the term changed?
Sure. Yeah, so as you mentioned, I was a co-founder there with my older brother. I also, from my background, came from a very prominent family in New York that was involved in financial services, very publicly, so always in kind of the spotlight. Prior to Arca and really dealing with this and understanding that, I was actually kind of unaware of my own kind of inner issues with that. And so when I said I was a co-founder there, it was very much the junior partner. And in a family, and people can, like you say, everybody, you have anxiety, no matter how good things look or how bad things are, everybody is human and they're having their own human experience. There was a certain level of anxiety and not feeling really adequate at my core about some of these things. So you can say when you come from a place where you have a lot of opportunity, if you can say that you don't feel that's necessarily earned. And until you actually deal with whatever it is that you're struggling with or the things that bother you, and really face them and spend times with them and grapple with them. For me, we can get into this. It ended up being like a group thing where it was very helpful to see other people struggling with similar things and realize that while they all may be different, we're all very, very similar, and there was something comforting in that. Until that occurred, I really probably wasn't capable of leading a team. And being in the seat that I was. So, mental fitness and, dealing with your things is very important personally, but it also helps you not just lead, but also be a great teammate and a supportive, team member anyway. So in any role, I think you have to, practice that.
And thank you for sharing that. I think it's interesting where we talk about these different journeys, and sometimes it's like where people end up, right? It's like when the founder or I think it was the founder of Netflix, Mark Randolph, wrote a book on his journey, and it all looks like happy unicorns and rainbows on the other side of it. But how about the start and the evolution of what you have to go through to get there? Or sometimes it's an ebb and flow. So understanding and facing yourself, Rayne, I think that's a really good point to start on that journey. And of someone who came from a background that's surrounded by finance, and finance is, a huge pressure mentally of society, particularly in America, and which is I'm gonna key for another show of ours on the network around senses and sense and emotions and money. That's a fun one. But I'm curious. Yeah, it's a fun. It's a good one. Different host, so you won't be talking to me for a third time, but different host. I'm curious, like what does mental fitness mean to you in this aspect? And as a business leader, sure, but and how the titles of co-founder, but like it's kind of, I'm gonna quote Robin from Peloton, and for you it could be the king of yourself, but you really have to feel like the queen, right? Because then you can really be able to show up. You could be labeled as a co-founder, but that doesn't mean anything if you can't lean into that role and responsibility. So just curious of,
Sure.
What does that mean to you?
For me, it means honesty with myself, and able to look in and recognize both things that are going well, things that are not going well, that both of these things are okay, and kind of take the judgment away from these things. And I think this is why I was very excited to do your podcast. I think that we stigmatize issues around mental health too much. And also, I think it also goes into our increasingly optically driven society where we have a lot of exposure to, like you say, success stories. Just to use that example, we really only get to hear the books of the people that made it. So there's a huge survivorship bias on these things. People don't realize how much good fortune and luck goes into these things. People are not always candid with the struggles that they deal with because you're not necessarily rewarded for that, for being, brutally honest and showing that you had weaknesses. So I think we've set up a system where you're only seen, you see massive success, kind of these outside the norm outcomes, and you're not encouraged to show any sort of internal conflict or problems. And so that's what you get. And I go back to the way I was raised in this very public way. One of the most probably helpful things was we had a disintegration of that very publicly as well. And that was no longer a pressure that was on you, and it was released me from that. I'm not sure I would have gotten to the place that I am right now if that hadn't occurred. And as painful as that was, it really removed that, do I deserve this, or what, there was no more there. So I was forced to face what was going on internally and deal with it, and also have people see very bad things going on, and it wasn't fatal. And that turned out to be for me, and this is very personal, I think, for every person, but mine is the to be honest with where I am and not be afraid of finding things that are wrong, or faults or weaknesses. Recognizing, you can always get better at something, but also there are going to be people that are better than you at things. And I think that gets to my leadership style and what we do at Arca is we have a team of very talented people that are great at what they do. And I would be shocked if I was better at any of them in any of their areas. So that in the leadership sense and running something, to be comfortable with the things that you don't do well and that it's a team, and those things are okay. So, for me, mental fitness was really being honest with myself, identifying those things, working on the things that I want to get better at, being comfortable with things that weren't as great, but not letting them be paralyzing or not able to move on from.
No, I think that's a great answer. And I think in regards to kind of the aspect of honesty, which I see as a theme in our being honest with yourself, and honesty is a theme in our conversation because again, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a licensed professional. I do surround myself by a lot of therapists, and I really like to look inside the psychology of a mind. And half the time is once you're honest and comfortable with yourself, you accept the fact that stay in your lane, you know what you're good at, you know what you're not good at. But I think a lot of the time with companies and large corporations is when you have people who are trying to do all the things to then look good across the whole board. And it's like, stay in your lane. But that also comes from leadership of confidence, because if the leader is also exhibiting those types of characteristics, then that's how employees are also going to act and work. So, while I do believe in a democracy and we're all, equals, there's all titles, but there has to be some form of structure or,
Sure.
there's no company. So I love that approach and love, that you're owning that. And I'm curious, how I've watched as a consultant, kind of being my own team and having people who I work with, and just really always loving to be the team player. But I've watched and seen and always been interested in the involvement of the workplace. And people
Sure.
spoke about this prior to the pandemic, but I'm curious for you of having offices, coast, on both coasts, and what was your approach when starting the company to mental wellness, and then how are you continued to develop that practice as I guess society and the workplace evolves?
Yeah. I think you're very important what you said about, leadership in that regard. Democratic in certain regards, but there actually has to be somebody in the front of this. And that's where it's just a very subtle differentiation. My role is very much that in the front and setting that tone and those cultural cues, but that is my role. It can still be co-equal on certain things. And I think the way we founded this company, I had a co-equal founders, and mine happened to be more in the motivating, aligning, thinking about these type of things. We have another co-founder who's very talented in one area in investment practice, another one in law. And it's to identify that these things are kind of skills and aptitudes that are different and not necessarily one above the other. So that's the only slight shading I would make. And then on the culture side, where we were never, especially at the beginning, in a startup, you're not specifically sitting around thinking about mental fitness and wellness generally, but you can be doing things where you're optimizing for both human performance, their happiness and well-being in general, because it gets you good outcomes for people and your company. So we've always been focused on a very inclusive, like ownership-driven strategy, where by both aligning people economically, but also in the way the company is run, to be giving visibility and understanding, so you understand things. So we're not the fastest to make decisions where it's very top-down directed, but you align people, give them a voice, give them real input and real information, and that creates less, a startup is a very challenging place to begin with, very uncertain for people. So without information and just things happening, which will happen anyway, even if you try to do this, you get uncertainty, concern, people worrying about financial things, the direction of company, time wasted, things like that. So kind of transparency and feedback to align people in ownership. And this was just a general feeling to really have a company where people felt like owners and really were. And then once the pandemic hit, you really had to be conscious that it's hard to understand how much subtle human interaction goes on in a workplace, both for community, human touch, all the things that why we congregate together and get together. It's hard to quantify, but you feel it in its absence. And as a virtual company, where we have, our headquarters are here in Los Angeles, we have team members all over the country, that we really had to be very conscious about our interactions online. So we actually tried to do at least 2 all hands meetings a month, one with no agenda, where it was just getting together and really just interacting with people, trying to get to know them, and things like that. And then the other one was, surprisingly, I don't think people understand, without the social cues of human contact, how problematic sometimes text communication can be in places like Slack, emails, and the less context you have in interactions, the more you're able to fill in on your own.
Yep.
And where we have a very welcoming culture, where everybody can raise their hand and contribute anywhere that they are. The last thing I want to do is diminish that enthusiasm or have somebody feel bad or create a culture where they're put down. And sometimes that could happen in text or where there wasn't a context. And it wasn't always that was the meaning, so it was just people sometimes communicate roughly. And so you really had to be conscious about these things. So my entire time was making sure these things were going smoothly. And then the final thing I would say is that the frictionless of this time, you can do Zooms all day, you can work 24/7. We have a very motivated team. It was really to implement mandatory time away from your screens. In crypto especially, we have a 24/7, 365 type of business. It literally trades all the time. There's coverage for our portfolio all the time. We have to make sure that people are off the screens, that are not thinking about it. It can burn out, and people can make bad decisions, and it's not good for their health. It's not good for our company. So we really had to be very stern about that. I'll pause there.
Oh yeah, no. See, I mean, you hit so many points, Rayne, because frankly, at least where the fatigue and burnout is real. And I think a lot of people don't, particularly like in the workplace setting, people are nervous to say I'm burnt out, because then as a team member, we're all relying on each other to produce an exceptional product and output, right? Because why not? That's what, we want, especially if we all have an ownership or stake in a company. But at the same time, that's not necessarily the healthy way, because that's when mistakes can happen. And I do want to point out the importance of communication. I read a book once called The 4 Agreements, and one is don't make assumptions. And I love that one, because if you look at the chain of communication half the time, I try to always, sometimes, back a couple of years ago, I would be the one at 10:30 on Slack responding to potentially a client who sees something and I'm responding. I'm like, that was the old way. New way is take a beat. Where is that other person? What are they experiencing? Putting myself in their shoes, because then the chain of communication, like where I call it the chain of stress, right? Someone texts you around something, they're stressed. Then the next person's stressed. And then there's the person who's stressed, who has to vent to the other person. It's like the chain of stress that's put on other people. And it's like, well, let's just meet where the first point of stress is and figure it out from there, but don't take on that energy. And I think through your point of texting Slack is that if something can get completely misconstrued because you have to understand what's going on the other side of that keyboard. So it's something that I love to hear you say is that like if you kind of create those boundaries and space for people to process and be more efficient with their communication and not have the points of stress and kill that. Sometimes, of course, that happens. It's life.
Yeah.
But being able to address it without calling anyone out or putting emotions behind it, I think is a fabulous strategy. And it's really great to hear you say that.
What I would say on that communication front, and you're so correct, it's assumptions. Communication is a two-way street. Whatever you say doesn't really matter. You're looking to convey something on the receiving end. So what we make the rule is kind of here on written communications like Slack and email, great for informative things. This, in the moment there is any sort of exchange of ideas, of any sort of back and forth, and it doesn't even have to be contentious. But the moment we are saying something like, I disagree with that and we need to do that, that moment, you have to pick up the phone or get on a Zoom, because this is a horrible way to communicate where there's actually trying to get an exchange of ideas. And maybe my own shortcomings actually make this more sensitive to me. I am not a great fast typer in general. So this is a horrible medium for me to exchange, like to interact with somebody's idea, process it, then type something thoughtful back. The moment this is happening, I immediately want to get on the phone and discuss these things and bring whoever's talking about it. And I've noticed that if you actually do that religiously, it really changes the dynamic and less misunderstandings.
Oh yeah, I'm the old school of picking up the phone, not hiding behind the keyboard. As someone who I could be fast, but my fast typing could actually like hold up, Jen, like let's take a beat and hop on the phone. Because I remember I was getting frustrated one day because it was the point of stressors where someone was just being completely. I'm not going to say the word because I don't cuss on my podcast, but being really, the A word. And I was like, and then it goes to the point of stress. And then I call my production assistant right away. And I was like, listen, this is not coming from me. This is coming from this. This is why I'm speaking to you this way, because it's purely just not nice, like it's just not nice. So I love that. And so I'm curious, given our state, because I know we have a couple of minutes here, but given our state of the work environment, I'm hoping now that companies are taking, mental wellness, fitness, communication more seriously, and at the forefront of culture. Because recruiting in a virtual world is also interesting, right? You can't lure them in with snacks and all that stuff. Eventually, of course, there's offices, but ideally, we're looking at the people. We want the people to work with the people, not to come here for the snacks. But how do you see mental fitness transforming in the future, kind of given our state of being right now?
I think what you're seeing from companies, and I can speak very specifically about ours, but then more generally, is that this pandemic, in this kind of virtual world has made both the labor pool and your access to people kind of fluid and almost infinite because there really are no barriers. So there's that. But then there's also an incredibly broad, pool for the candidate and people to go to as well. So the way we do it here is on the competency side. We make sure everybody's incredibly competent. And then for my role really is, and this is where it gets down to, different roles, is really trying to make sure that people are a cultural fit. And that's a two-way street, to really make sure that whoever's coming here really understands what we're trying to do, understands, that this is a very high-paced, super kind of driven on people's own, like the passion is something we see from a lot of people at Arca, and that if you don't have a passion for this might not be the culture and the environment for you, because this is not the place where anybody is really going to be standing over your shoulder, making sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. It's much more likely that it'll be, please make sure you take your PTO, which is unlimited here, get away from things, take some time for like deeper thought, get a mental hygiene day and things like that. So I think that what the way we do it is just to make sure that people understand the culture that they're getting into, be very transparent, and understand that every aspect of their well-being, health, mental health, desires for personal development, all of those things we really align with and really do believe in. Turnover is incredibly disruptive no matter what. So that interaction and that relationship, I would like to be forever. And we've had very low turnover here, like one maybe person over this entire company, which is unusual for a startup. So just really, that is in our DNA. The people make this company great. Unhealthy, unwell, sad, angry, miserable people do not make a great people company. So we try to make the environment which makes that, optimizes for that, which is, as you know, difficult in this weird virtual world. But if you really are trying at it and it is a tenet of what you want, I don't think it's that hard. It's easy to do what you really believe in.
Yep. Yeah. And I always say you can be surrounded easily by these energy vampires, and you don't want an energy vampire ever to take the energy from your company or from yourself, if whether that's a personal or professional relationship. So one last question for you, and this is a personal one, is how do you flex your mental fitness muscle?
Mine is really making sure I get enough time away. So I'm recently engaged, but I don't have any children. And this is pretty much my entire life is Arca, and I love what we do. I am consumed by it, but without getting the perspective of distance and like actually allowing your mind to be fallow and regenerate and do other things, it's not good for the company and it's not good for everybody. So the things that are incredibly important to me are exercise. I had a pretty crazy knee replacement recently, which I was basically down after the surgery, amazingly fast recovery, but I had been kind of hindered for about 6 months where I couldn't do the things that I normally did. And that was starting to really take a toll on me in a more general way. So now that I'm healthy again, I really make sure I work out every day. I also take time away from my Slack machine and my phone machine and all of those things, and do not look at them. I'll put up a notice, if it's urgent or need me or whatever, and really take time away and do things that have nothing to do with the business. And this is important, even if it wasn't important for the business, and it's important for people. And even if you love everything you do, which I love, I've never done something that I love as much as this. Every single person at this company is a dear friend of mine. So it's not even, you wouldn't even classify what I do. I don't even feel like I'm working. It's not like you can put in an 18-hour day, you don't feel like it's work. But if you don't do other things and allow your mind to disengage with it, it will become tired and not good at it. So even though it feels great, you actually have to have that discipline to take those like regenerative times. So that's what I do for my mental health. I used to do more meditation and things like that. I didn't find it as useful as things like exercise and things like that. And I think what I would encourage people to do is not be dogmatic about what it is. People say you have to meditate or this or that. Find something that works for you, that you see the good result in, and be honest with it. I think people kind of get enticed or enamored with saying, oh, I do this, I'm part of this practice, and there's a little bit of slightly virtue signaling on this type of stuff. Make sure what you do is actually just good for you, and that's more important. Like I was into it. Oh, I can meditate for 20 minutes. and it wasn't as helpful as me as working out for 20 minutes. So, get out of like that mode of like what you think people want you to do to be flexing your mental health, and more what actually does do your mental health.
Oh my gosh, thank you for that. Because here's the thing, I totally did the Peloton meditation thing. And I'm like, hold on, 10 minutes. I worked out 10 minutes. Now I'm tired again. Like, no. Like, I need to keep it moving. Like, let's get some tea in here, but I think to your point, you need to flex the right mental fitness muscle for you. For me is working out too. It's like, that's my time and space. And I think if not everyone and also to your point, Rayne, like not everyone understands that I'm in love with my work because it doesn't feel like work. And I surround myself by people, clients who are just family and a part of, my larger team that I show up every day. But that's also a boundary of just because someone else doesn't feel that like relationship with work doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means that maybe it's nice to step away and, if that's having a good meal or whatever, just to put your mind off of it. And hobbies, that's another conversation. My hobby is this and I love it, but that's another thing around what people tell you to do. Like you should knit because that might work for you. Not going to work for me. So
exactly. These one size fits all solutions we're very different, everybody. And that's okay. It can be very different. Your solution to this. I encourage people to figure it out.
Exactly. Well, I do appreciate you joining us today and being vulnerable and opening up around this topic. I wanted to just give you a moment if there was anything else you wanted to lead the audience before we wrapped up today.
Just that thing about this stigmatization of mental health. We treat everything else. You can be sick, you can be hurt. Those are all things that are accepted and fine. There is still a stigma around proper mental health or depression or anxiety. These things are real, and it is okay to be suffering from them and seek help and work it out. And I would encourage people, the more people that are honest about these, struggles, and that we all have, feet of clay at times on this, that it's okay. And that there are many more people that are struggling with these things than you think. And you can get through it. So that's what I would leave people with.
Well, thank you. Namaste to that one. And I just want to thank you so much, Rayne Steinberg, CEO of Arca, for joining us today. I'm your host, Jen Sherman, and we will catch you next time on We Are Everyone. Thanks so much. Thank you for tuning into another episode of We Are Everyone. You can subscribe to We Are Everyone on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and also be sure to visit www.pivotalmoments.org to learn more about the organization. And we also want to hear what mental wellness means to you. So you can follow us on social media, submit your video, and we will catch you next time. Thank you so much.